everything you need to stay balanced on long trips. Residence Inn.
With the midterm elections 6 weeks away, polls continue to point to Republican gains in both the House and the Senate. The White House is under increasing pressure to convince voters it's doing everything it can to boost the ailing US economy. A man very much in the thick of that effort joins us now at the Reuters Washington Summit, White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs. Mr. Gibbs, thanks very much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
What do you think we're going to see in the second half of the President's administration? Are we going to see a different President Obama, given what the polls are showing, given what he's done? Are we going to see a different approach, do you think?
Well, look, we've got 6 more important weeks to go before Americans make a choice in this election, and I think they'll have a pretty clear choice. And look, I think regardless of the outcome of the elections, there are still some very big problems that Washington is going to have to work together to solve. Our medium and long-term fiscal picture, education reauthorization will certainly be important. We've got to work through together on a bipartisan basis Afghanistan. And we're going to have to take steps together to improve our economy and to ensure that the recovery that we've seen continues. And so regardless of what the outcome is, Democrats and Republicans are going to have to work together to solve these problems. The president has been ready to work with Republicans since the first day he got here, and hopefully he'll get a chance to do that.
I mean, you mentioned the fiscal outlook, and obviously without prejudging what the Deficit Commission is going to say, there does seem to be a consensus emerging perhaps that, you know, a long-term adjustment of the fiscal picture has to weigh more on spending. You know, spending has to take a larger share of the burden perhaps than taxes. Is that a judgment that you...
Well, look, I would say first and foremost, the best thing we can do to improve the deficit picture right now is to get this economy moving again. And we had to take some extraordinary steps through the Recovery Act to get the economy churning again and to have positive growth. I think that the Deficit Commission certainly was charged with, and I think we'll take a look at every aspect of our federal budget to ensure that we are not wasting money, that our fiscal policies are sane and sound, and I have no doubt we'll come back with a host of recommendations on both sides of that ledger.
In terms of one of the big issues, obviously, is the tax cut issue. Do you see any chance of a deal or a compromise on that before the elections? Well,
look, I think there is agreement on one thing, and that is preserving and making permanent the middle-class tax cuts. So I actually think we've got a deal if Republicans will take it. Let's take the middle-class portion of these tax cuts and tell middle-class families in this country that your tax burden is not going to change. We're not going to raise taxes right now on middle-class families. Let's put aside this notion of whether or not we're going to borrow $700 billion for tax cuts, mostly for millionaires and billionaires. We can put that off to the side. We've got some time to debate that question, and we can have a pretty robust debate. But only in Washington could two sides agree on part of something, and we'd be looking for something else to make that agreement permanent.
But if that's the case, why do you think the Democrats, I mean, haven't actually put that bill now in front of both houses and actually got, you know, a middle-class tax cut bill?
Look, you know? Yeah, and I think, look, those discussions are certainly ongoing. I think we agree on keeping the middle-class tax cuts. Republicans want to borrow $700 billion for the tax cuts for the upper end. But the president believes we simply can't afford to borrow that money. We shouldn't hold the middle class part of this hostage while Republicans wait for borrowing $700 billion more.
There's a few Democrats in the House who also are nervous about putting taxes up for anybody, as you put it. So, I mean, you do have some work to do convincing your own party, maybe.
Well, look, I don't doubt that, look, we're a big and robust party, and not everybody's going to agree with everything. I will say I think there are very few people that think it makes a lot of economic sense to borrow another $700 billion for those upper-end tax cuts. You know, if you make $1 million a year, your consumer demand is just fine. You're not waiting for the tax cut to buy the next car or big screen TV. You can do that right now.
Just final thought, though, on bipartisanship. We haven't seen a lot of bipartisan cooperation. I mean, can we really see in the second half of the Obama administration, do you think there is a real prospect for a new bipartisan sort of era, if you like?
You know, look, this president has been ready and willing to work with anybody that's serious when dealing with the problems. This president isn't into playing games and isn't into gridlock. We've got problems that we haven't dealt with for a long time that have to be dealt with. Regardless of what happens in November, this president stands ready to work with Democrats in his own party on Capitol Hill and Republicans on addressing those problems. But bipartisanship, we learned the hard way in 2009 is a two-way street. Just because the president goes to Capitol Hill and reaches out and wants to work with Republicans doesn't mean Republicans are going to be willing to do that. And so we'll see what the answer to that is after the election.
All right. Well, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs joining us there at the Reuters Washington Summit. I'm Simon Denyer, and this is Reuters.